Weddings are supposed to be joyful, right? Celebrations of love, family, unity, all that sentimental stuff. That's what I kept telling myself when we pulled up to the venue in Savannah. It was this historic estate wrapped in ivy and old money, the kind of place that practically screamed generational wealth. My wife, Rachel, looked radiant, her hand clutching mine like we were still newlyweds. And for a brief second, I thought maybe I could enjoy the night. I had no idea it would be the evening that would unravel something deep in me I hadn't even realized was hanging by a thread. We were there for her sister's wedding. Madison had always been the golden child, charming, polished, practically engineered for country club life. She was marrying Andrew Madsen, heir to Madsen Industries, one of those companies that does something vague but makes a lot of money doing it. I had met his father, Gregory, only once before. He was the kind of man who shook your hand like he wanted to remind you who had the stronger grip. You know the type. His suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, his shoes clicking like punctuation marks on the marble floor as he strutted around. Still, I played nice. That's what you do at these things. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give them that. Live orchestra, customized vows, flower petals scattered by professionally dressed kids who definitely weren't related to anyone. Then came the reception, a massive tent set up with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like some royal gala. Everything was white and gold. Every table name a reference to some luxury destination I've only seen on Netflix. I tried not to feel out of place. I wore my best suit, the one I usually reserve for funerals and performance reviews, and I stuck to the bar, making small talk with the other guests who also didn't quite fit into the sea of polished perfection. When dinner ended and speeches began, I expected the usual routine: tearful parents, awkwardly charming best men. But then Gregory took the mic. He started off smooth. His voice carried effortlessly, rich and deliberate, the kind of tone people develop from decades of being listened to. He spoke about family legacy, about the importance of building something lasting. I wasn't expecting to be mentioned at all. Why would I be? I'm just a brother-in-law. But then his eyes landed on me from across the room. That smile curved in a way that wasn't friendly. He said, "It's good to see the whole family together, and it's especially heartwarming to witness the different walks of life coming together in unity. Some of us, of course, are decision-makers, industry leaders, visionaries." Laughter, polite, thin. "And others," he continued, raising his glass ever so slightly, "well, others make sure the boxes are stacked neatly and the forklifts run on time." I froze. My stomach turned to stone. There was a flicker of confusion in the room. A few heads turned. A few people glanced in my direction. My name wasn't said, but it didn't have to be. I was the only person in that entire damn tent who worked in a warehouse. The only one who's ever used steel-toe boots for something other than fashion. It was a jab, clean and deliberate, dressed up in civility and coated in champagne. And the worst part? My wife didn't say a word. Rachel sat there beside me, spine straight, hands folded neatly in her lap, her face frozen in a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't grab my hand. She didn't scoff or roll her eyes or do anything to signal that what was just said wasn't okay. No protest, no defense. Just silence. I laughed once. Dry, sharp, humorless. My fork trembled slightly against the plate. I looked at her, but she avoided my eyes. A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and someone at our table let out a nervous chuckle, probably thinking it was all in good fun. But it wasn't in that moment something in me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just this cold realization that maybe, just maybe, this entire room saw me the way Gregory did. Like a functional piece of furniture. Necessary, maybe, but unremarkable. Disposable. I'd spent 10 years managing a warehouse that kept over 40 people employed, optimizing logistics, shaving costs, increasing safety protocols, doing work that mattered. And yet, to this man, to this room, I was just a guy who moved boxes. I sat through the rest of that reception like a ghost, nodding when spoken to, smiling when expected. Inside, though, I was already somewhere else. That speech didn't just insult me. It exposed something I'd been blind to for years. I couldn't sit through another speech. My fingers were clenched around the edge of the table, white-knuckled, while everyone else laughed at Gregory's next-smug anecdote. Rachel hadn't said a word. I needed air, space to remember who the hell I was before I started questioning it. I slipped out through the back of the tent, past the catering crew, past the rows of manicured hedges and fairy lights that made the whole estate look like it belonged in a movie. My chest was tight, not with sadness, not even with anger exactly, just a dull, bitter weight I didn't know how to set down. I pulled out my phone, maybe just to feel like I had something to focus on that didn't involve being humiliated in front of 200 strangers. That's when I saw the email. Subject line, confidential, finalized terms, Delta Core/Madsen acquisition. I blinked. My heart jumped into my throat. My fingers, still slightly shaking from the adrenaline of sitting through that speech, tapped it open. The body of the message was short and to the point, like everything my CEO sent. Logan, the deal is officially closed. Madsen Industries is now under Delta Core management. Effective immediately, your role will transition to Regional Operations Director. You'll oversee integration across all acquired Madsen facilities. We'll brief further Monday. Congratulations. I stood there in the dark, the soft buzz of crickets around me, the muffled sound of champagne glasses clinking in the distance, and reread the email 3 times. I wasn't hallucinating. The promotion had been hinted at in earlier talks, but the timing, the sheer absurdity of it arriving right at this moment, was almost too much to process. Gregory Madsen, the same man who just stood under that glowing tent and reduced me to a warehouse grunt in front of my wife and her entire family, now effectively worked for me. Not directly, maybe not on paper, but in every meaningful way that mattered. His entire empire, his legacy, was now a line item on our reports, and I was in charge of running it. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, not from embarrassment this time, but from the overwhelming weight of realization. I wasn't the man they thought I was in there. I wasn't the man Gregory tried to paint for them, or the one Rachel didn't bother defending. I was the man with the authority now, the one who signed off on budgets, who reviewed regional performance, who decided which executives were kept and which were cut. Gregory had no idea that in less than 72 hours, he'd be sitting in a boardroom across from me, waiting to hear my evaluation of his operation. A laugh escaped me, low and quiet, more out of disbelief and amusement. The universe didn't usually hand out moments like this. For the past decade, I'd worked my ass off in silence, optimizing logistics networks, negotiating vendor contracts, leading warehouse teams through union talks and system overhauls. I was the guy who kept things moving when everyone else took credit. The job wasn't flashy, and I didn't wear expensive watches or give grand speeches at weddings, but the numbers always spoke for me, and apparently, they had spoken loud enough for the board to hand me the reins. I leaned against a brick pillar near the garden, the Georgia night thick and humid. My phone still lit in my hand. I scrolled through the rest of my inbox, and there it was, a forwarded org chart, updated to reflect the new leadership structure. My name, in bold, sat at the top of the Madsen Operations Division. Below me, a cascading list of familiar departments, and Gregory's name tucked beneath it in a new advisory capacity. I suddenly remembered the way he had looked at me earlier, that glint of smug satisfaction in his eyes as he delivered his little jab. Some of us are leaders, he had said, and now I was the one holding the clipboard with his fate scribbled across it in measurable KPIs and quarterly performance reviews. The moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about validation. It was about clarity. I wasn't just a man who moved boxes. I was the one who made sure entire systems didn't collapse. I was the one the company trusted to stabilize and scale an acquisition that spanned 4 states and hundreds of employees. I was the one they turned to when they needed someone with grit, with discipline, and with the kind of work ethic Gregory Madsen probably couldn't spell without an assistant. I took a deep breath, finally letting some of the bitterness melt away into something sharper, something focused. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, straightened my jacket, and looked up at the glowing tent ahead of me. I didn't feel small anymore. I was just about to head back into the reception tent when I spotted Chase, the groom, standing alone near the terrace steps. He had his jacket slung over one shoulder, tie already loosened, a glass of something untouched in his hand. His expression said everything: tight jaw, furrowed brow, that uneasy, helpless posture of someone caught between 2 forces they couldn't control. When he saw me, his face fell even further, like he'd been hoping to avoid this moment but knew it was inevitable. "Logan," he said, his voice low, careful. "Man, I'm really sorry about that speech." I didn't know he was going to. I raised a hand and cut him off. I wasn't in the mood for damage control or soft apologies. I stared at him for a moment, letting the silence build just enough to make him squirm. Then I asked, "Chase, do you even know who owns your father's company now?" He blinked, confused, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone again, the screen still open to the confidential email. I tilted it toward him so he could read every word, every line, every name. I watched his eyes skim the screen. I watched the color drain from his face like a tide pulling back from the shore. By the time he reached the sentence about my promotion, he looked like he might be sick. He looked up at me, mouth slightly open. You wait, what? I'm the new regional operations director. I said, slowly and clearly, as of an hour ago. And your father's company? Madsen Industries? It's part of Delta Corps now, which means every facility, every manager, every asset, including Gregory, is under my jurisdiction, starting Monday morning. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His hand gripped the railing beside him, knuckles pale. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head, the math adding up in real time. His father hadn't just insulted me in front of their family and friends. He'd mocked the man who now had final say over his professional future. Chase finally exhaled. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I said, tucking my phone away. Quite a toast, huh? He shook his head, then ran a hand through his hair like he was trying to physically reset the moment. He had no idea. I swear, he thought you were just... I don't know Rachel's husband warehouse guy. That's all he ever sees. Yeah, I said again, this time quieter, that's the problem. There was a long pause between us. The sound of the party drifted out from the tent. Music, clinking glasses, the kind of forced laughter that always floats around expensive events. Chase looked like he wanted to disappear. I'm not here to ruin your night, I added. I came to support Rachel. I came because I thought this was about family. He nodded slowly, still stunned. He's going to lose his mind. Probably, I said, but that's his problem. Another silence stretched out, this one heavier. He looked at me again, less like a groom, and more like a man standing in front of a loaded freight train with no clue how to stop it. He's going to realize what he did eventually, Chase said quietly. No, I replied. He realized the second I walked out. But he did it anyway. Because people like him don't think consequences apply until they're printed in a quarterly report or delivered by someone with a title. Monday, he'll have both. I left Chase on the terrace, still pale, still gripping the railing like it might keep the entire night from collapsing around him. I didn't wait. I didn't need time to cool down or think it over. There was no satisfaction to be found in quiet dignity anymore. That moment, his moment, where he chose to take a cheap swing at my character in front of a crowd, was going to be the last time he ever spoke my name without understanding exactly who I was. So I walked straight back into that ballroom. The lights inside had dimmed a little, the kind of warm, expensive glow you see in old money weddings, where the floral centerpieces are taller than the guests and the wine never stops flowing. Laughter echoed from different corners of the room. The DJ had just started another forgettable soft jazz track, and clinking glass signaled someone proposing a toast again. But I didn't hear any of it. I was locked in. I saw him at the far end, seated with a half-circle of smug, silver-haired men, all of them dressed in variations of the same overpriced tuxedo. Gregory was laughing, hand raised mid-story, basking in his self-appointed spotlight, his chair angled just right to broadcast dominance, casual, confident, oblivious, until he saw me walking toward him. He noticed me before the others did. His face tightened ever so slightly, a flicker of recognition, maybe confusion. He straightened his spine and gave me that politician smile, wide but soulless, as if to say, still upset about the joke? I didn't break eye contact. I walked until I was standing right at the edge of their table. I could feel the hush ripple across the group, like a scent of blood and water. Eyes turned, forks paused midair. I pulled out my phone, already cued to the email, and held it out toward him without a word. The screen glowed in the dim light, illuminating the blocky black text of our corporate email system. He blinked, leaned forward slightly, and read. I watched his face shift in real time. The color in his cheeks drained first, then his mouth tightened. His eyes flicked back to mine, and then to the screen again, as if rereading it might rewrite it. The silence around us was no longer polite. His friends were watching now, too, murmuring, puzzled, sensing something shifting but not sure how or why. I didn't give him time to recover. As of Monday, I said, my voice calm but loud enough to carry through surrounding tables, Madsen Industries will be operating as a Delta Corps facility. I let that land for a beat, then added, and I'll be stepping in as Regional Operations Director. A few people gasped. I heard a soft, surprised, "Oh," from one of the wives nearby. Gregory still hadn't moved. His hands were locked on the edge of the tablecloth. Knuckles visibly tense, he looked like someone realizing too late that the seat he thought was a throne was actually the witness stand. I tilted my head and smiled, just enough. So, about those box-moving jokes, I continued, My tone even professional, like I was addressing a room of stakeholders. You'll want to remember them at our next review meeting. Might not land the same way. A few stifled laughs broke out, hesitant, unsure if it was safe to respond. Gregory didn't laugh. His eyes didn't leave my face, but there was no challenge left in them. No smirk, just quiet shock. Congratulations to the newlyweds, I said, pivoting slightly to the rest of the table, most of whom were now either staring at their drinks or pretending to check their phones. Looking forward to building something sustainable together, I turned and walked away without waiting for a response, slipping back in the flow of the party, like I just dropped off a thank you card. The music never stopped. The dancing resumed. But at Gregory's table, the celebration had clearly lost its rhythm. I didn't wait. I didn't need time to cool down or think it over. There was no satisfaction to be found in quiet dignity anymore. That moment, his moment, where he chose to take a cheap swing at my character in front of a crowd, was going to be the last time he ever spoke my name without understanding exactly who I was. So I walked straight back into that ballroom. The lights inside had dimmed a little, the kind of warm, expensive glow you see in old-money weddings, where the floral centerpieces are taller than the guests and the wine never stops flowing. Laughter echoed from different corners of the room. The DJ had just started another forgettable soft jazz track, and clinking glass signaled someone proposing a toast again. But I didn't hear any of it. I was locked in. I saw him at the far end, seated with a half-circle of smug, silver-haired men, all of them dressed in variations of the same overpriced tuxedo. Gregory was laughing, hand raised mid-story, basking in his self-appointed spotlight. His chair angled just right to broadcast dominance, casual, confident, oblivious, until he saw me walking toward him. He noticed me before the others did. His face tightened ever so slightly, a flicker of recognition, maybe confusion. He straightened his spine and gave me that politician smile, wide but soulless, as if to say, still upset about the joke? I didn't break eye contact. I walked until I was standing right at the edge of their table. I could feel the hush ripple across the group, like a scent of blood and water. Eyes turned, forks paused midair. I pulled out my phone, already cued to the email, and held out toward him without a word. The screen glowed in the dim light, illuminating the blocky black text of our corporate email system. He blinked, leaned forward slightly, and read. I watched his face shift in real time. The color in his cheeks drained first. Then his mouth tightened. His eyes flicked back to mine and then to the screen again, as if rereading it might rewrite it. The silence around us was no longer polite. His friends were watching now, too, murmuring, puzzled, sensing something shifting but not sure how or why. I didn't give him time to recover. As of Monday, I said, my voice calm but loud enough to carry through surrounding tables, Madsen Industries will be operating as a Delta Core facility. I let that land for a beat, then added, and I'll be stepping in as Regional Operations Director. A few people gasped. I heard a soft, surprised, "Oh," from one of the wives nearby. Gregory still hadn't moved. His hands were locked on the edge of the tablecloth, knuckles visibly tense. He looked like someone realizing too late that the seat he thought was a throne was actually the witness stand. I tilted my head and smiled, just enough, so, about those box-moving jokes. I continued, my tone even professional, like I was addressing a room of stakeholders. You'll want to remember them at our next review meeting might not land the same way. A few stifled laughs broke out, hesitant, unsure if it was safe to respond. Gregory didn't laugh. His eyes didn't leave my face, but there was no challenge left in them. No smirk, just quiet shock. Congratulations to the newlyweds, I said, pivoting slightly to the rest of the table, most of whom were now either staring at their drinks or pretending to check their phones. Looking forward to building something sustainable together, I turned and walked away without waiting for a response, slipping back in the flow of the party, like I'd just dropped off a thank you card. The music never stopped. The dancing resumed. But at Gregory's table, the celebration had clearly lost its rhythm. Monday came with the quiet finality of something already decided. I didn't put on a suit. I didn't need to dress the part to play it. I wore what I always wore when it was work to do. Steel-toe boots, fitted jeans, a plain button-down, and the same watch I'd worn since my first promotion at Delta Corps, scratched and solid. I pulled into the parking lot of Madsen Industries headquarters just after 7 a.m., before the rest of the executive team had even finished their overpriced lattes. The building was sleek, soulless, glass and chrome, built more to impress investors than a function. It reeked of money spent without return. I walked through the lobby without pausing. The security guard asked for ID, hesitated when he didn't recognize my badge, then waved me through after a quick phone call to admin. They were expecting me. The leadership briefing was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp. I knew Gregory would be there, though I doubted he'd be ready for what was coming. I stepped into the top-floor conference room at 7:55. It was massive, all polished walnut and leather chairs, with a view that overlooked the city like it belonged to someone. Gregory was already seated at the far end of the table, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't stand when I entered. He didn't speak, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. Two other executives, a CFO and a director of logistics, gave me polite nods. They looked uncertain, like people still try to read the wind before committing to a direction. I took my seat at the head of the table, opened my laptop, and began. We'll begin with performance, I said. No introductions, no small talk, just the work. Within minutes, I had the room in the palm of my hand. I'd spent the weekend reviewing everything: shipping logs, procurement breakdowns, staff retention rates, fleet efficiency reports. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't gloat. I didn't look in Gregory's direction more than I had to. I let the numbers speak. I asked direct questions no one had ever asked in this room before. I pointed to redundancies in the supply chain that cost the company tens of thousands a quarter. I flagged vendor contracts that hadn't been renegotiated in years. I laid out a timeline for restructuring that would reduce waste by 17% within 6 months. Gregory interrupted only once. I'll be speaking with Delta Corps CEO about this, he said, voice low and bitter, like he still believed rank could be reclaimed by tone alone. I didn't even look up from my notes. You're welcome to. He's the one who assigned me to this role. You report through me now. That's already been finalized. The silence that followed was heavier than any outburst he could have thrown. He sat back, blinking slowly, the weight of the new hierarchy finally settling on him. Not metaphorically. Literally. It was there in the organizational chart printed in the briefing packets, right beside the word reporting structure, his name, in a small gray box, flowed directly to mine. From that point forward, he didn't say another word. The meeting lasted 3.5 hours. I went department by department, calling out gaps in process and failures in accountability with clinical precision. It wasn't about revenge. This was my job. This was why they promoted me. Because while Gregory had spent the last 2 decades inflating his ego and shaking hands at golf tournaments, I'd been in the trenches, solving problems, saving costs, keeping people employed, and operations tight. There was no room for sentiment, no theatrics, just results. Gregory had to sit there, rigid and silent, watching his carefully curated legacy dismantled line by line. And the worst part for him, I imagine, was that I didn't once treat it personally. I didn't insult him. I didn't even look like I cared that he was in the room. Because in that setting, he wasn't special. He was a problem to solve, an outdated process to fix. And I was there to do what I always do, make systems better, regardless of whose name was on the building. The house was quiet when I got home. Not the kind of peaceful quiet that settles after a long day, but the kind that wraps itself around everything like a film, tense, airless. Rachel was already in the living room, curled up on the corner of the couch with a throw blanket around her legs, her phone resting face down on the coffee table. The TV was on low volume, some home renovation show she wasn't watching. She looked up when I walked in, but didn't smile, just studied me for a moment, like she wasn't sure who exactly had come back through the door. I set my bag down and sat in the chair across from her. No words passed between us for a full minute. The distance wasn't physical. It was something that had been growing quietly for a long time, like a crack in drywall you don't notice until it runs floor to ceiling. Finally, she spoke. I saw the email, she said. Chase forwarded it to the group chat after you left the wedding. Her voice was small, careful. I nodded. So, she hesitated. I guess I didn't really know what you actually did. Not like that. That's the problem, isn't it? I said, leaning forward, resting my arms on my knees. You've never really wanted to know. She blinked, lips parting as if to deny it, but then she closed her mouth again and looked down at her hands. She started twisting the wedding ring on her finger without realizing it. I was proud of you, she said quietly, but I didn't know how to explain it to people. My family, my friends, they all have these clean, impressive job titles. Consultants, executives, designers. And you manage warehouses. You wore boots and flannel, and came home smelling like forklifts and steel. And I knew how hard you worked. But every time someone asked what you did, I found myself using words like logistics or operations or supply chain. like I had to pat it out to make it respectable. Her voice cracked slightly on that last word. I sat back and let the silence settle. She didn't cry. Rachel wasn't the type. But I could see in the tightness of her posture, in the way her shoulders curled inward. I never needed you to be proud of the title. I said, I needed you to be proud of me. Just me, not what I wore to work, or how much I brought home, or whether your family approved. Just a man who came home to you every night, who worked late to make sure his team didn't fall apart, who never once made you feel small when you missed a promotion or brought your laptop on vacation because you had to stay online. She wiped at her eyes once, quick and sharp. I know. Then why did you sit there and let him humiliate me in front of 200 people? My voice was quiet, not angry, just tired. Why didn't you say something? She looked up. Finally, her eyes were red-rimmed. Because I was embarrassed, she whispered. And I hate that. I hate admitting it. I was embarrassed because I spent so long pretending we fit into their world. And when he made that joke, it was like he exposed what I'd always tried to hide, that you didn't belong in their circles, that we didn't. I didn't respond right away. There was nothing she could have said that would have stung more than that. And yet, in a strange way, it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months. Maybe longer. I can't be in a marriage where I'm a placeholder for something you wish you had, I said. Her face changed. The panic finally showed. You're not. Logan, I swear to God, you're not. I lost perspective. I got so wrapped up in the image of success that I forgot what real success looked like. And you're it. You've always been it. I know that now. I need more than that, I said. I need more than apologies after the fact. I need you to stand beside me, not 2 steps behind, hoping I stay quiet and don't embarrass you. I want to fix it, she said, and for once I believed her. I want us to go to counseling. I want to figure out why I let other people's expectations matter more than my own heart. Because you're right. I didn't offend you. And I'm sorry. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first time in a long while that I didn't feel like I was sitting in my own house as a guest. I nodded slowly. Then let's start there. 6 months passed, and with each one, the weight of that night at the wedding faded. Not into forgetfulness, but into clarity. It had marked a shift, a line that once crossed couldn't be stepped back over. Gregory Madsen never formally announced his retirement. No grand send-off, no legacy speech, not even a catered farewell in the executive lounge. He was just gone one Monday. Rumors floated, of course. Health, stress, a desire to spend more time with family. But everyone inside Madsen Industries knew the truth. He had been nudged out, gently but firmly, by a board that no longer had patience for inefficiency wrapped in arrogance. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke louder than anything I could have said. Chase stepped into the role with more humility than I'd expected. The weight of his last name was still stitched into every part of the company. But under pressure, he didn't crack. He listened. He adapted. He stopped trying to impress his father and started learning how to lead. I held him accountable, just like I did with every other regional manager. And to his credit, he never asked for a shortcut. We rebuilt the operational structure from the inside out, streamlined supply chains, overhauled outdated systems, reinvested in frontline workers. The quarterly reports turned green faster than anyone predicted. The company didn't just recover. It flourished. Amanda and Chase had their first child that spring. A daughter. They named her Elise. I heard through one of the administrative assistants that Gregory wasn't invited to the hospital. No visitors. No announcement on social media. Just a quiet birth, celebrated among people who showed up when it mattered. And from what I was told, Gregory didn't fight it. He burned the bridge at his own daughter's wedding. And some things don't get rebuilt with apologies alone. Back at home, things were slower. Rachel and I kept going to therapy. It wasn't easy. The sessions were raw, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes maddening. But they were honest. We unpacked everything. Her silence, my resentment, the quiet distance that had been growing between us even before Gregory's toast made it obvious. She admitted that for years she'd been performing a version of our marriage to the world. Hoping it looked like the life she thought she was supposed to have, I admitted I'd stopped inviting her into my world, because I assumed she didn't want to be there somewhere in all of that mess. We started learning how to see each other again, not as roles or titles, or as someone we needed to explain to others, but just as us two people still trying, still choosing each other. Even when it would have been easy to shut the door and walk away, and me, I still wake up before the sun. I still drink my coffee black, and answer emails before half the office is even awake. I still wear the same boots I've always worn, scuffed, broken in, dependable. I walk warehouse floors with dust on my shoulders and grease on my palms. I speak to forklift drivers by name and know which machine in which facility needs replacement before the quarter ends. The job never stopped being work. But now, when I speak in a room, people listen. Not because they're afraid, not because I'm wielding a title, but because I earned it. Gregory's toast didn't break me. It clarified me. It stripped away every illusion, every polite half-smile, and every quiet compromise I'd made in the name of keeping peace, and what was left was something solid. Unshakable dignity not granted, but claimed. Some bridges stay burned. And maybe that's not a loss, maybe it's just making room for better ones.